Hello, drummers of the Drumset Artistry Mastermind group. This is an awesome group for drum set players. Thank you for being a member of this group. Today in my Facebook Live video, I want to talk about what I call codependent coordination. It's kind of a little joke I have with my students. But to begin with, let me just ask this question. Are you frustrated with your drumming? Do you go through episodes where your body feels like it's in ruts and it just wants to play the same things? Maybe you feel like you lack creativity with your drum beats or your fills. Maybe there's just a time when you wonder if I'm ever going to really be very good at this. These are questions that sometimes trouble the inner drummer and really do get in the way of being able to help us become better at playing the drums, the outer drummer. So what do I mean by codependent coordination? Well, like all of you, I started at some point at the very beginning and was really having problems separating the movements between my body parts. I didn't know very much about drumming. I started on snare drum at 11, began playing the drum set at 12, and that was about 46 years ago. That's how long I've been playing the drums, and I've been teaching now for 38 years. So I deal with a lot of issues with students, mostly limiting beliefs, to be honest with you. Most people really feel like they lack talent, and really what they lack is an understanding of how to approach the instrument in a way so their body can begin to understand and do the things that they hear in their head. So you obviously are going to work on some basic beats. Limbs will want to play together. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, musically speaking, the drum set evolved with the adventation of the bass drum pedal, and then eventually other little parts began manifesting on the drum set. It's got a very interesting history. I think I mentioned a video by Daniel Glass called The Century Project. The subtitle is 100 Years of American Music from Behind the Drums, 1865 to 1965. It's just absolutely fascinating what you'll learn. In fact, I felt like I understood and appreciated the different eras of music and actually could play them a little bit better, musically speaking, after watching his presentation. So what's this got to do with coordination and codependent coordination? Well, a lot of people don't really understand the process of how to build beats. If you remember as a kid, you would build forts. You'd start with one wall and then you'd maybe prop up a second wall and hopefully those two would stabilize each other. You get a third surface and then maybe a fourth surface. And eventually you got enough parts to where the architecture of all the body movements coalesced and became connected to where you could actually do what it is that you wanted to do. Well, having been involved and worked through like 100+ different books, mostly drum set books, but many of them were percussion books as well, snare drum, even a timpani manual, and some mallet keyboard books. I've just learned massive approaches to, if you will, helping people overcome the game of Twister on the drum set. Another joke I have, where if you've ever played the game Twister, you've got to contort your body and try not to fall down. So I try to use that analogy when we're working on stuff. So the common frustrations I have is separating the right hand and the right foot. When you're playing basic rock beats for the developing drummer, there's so many different little tricks that I've learned over the years to be able to help people immediately unlock their issues. The other thing is just tension. You know, like, for example, you might be able to put limbs together, but you're right on the edge of barely being able to do that. And there's a lot of physical tension, like your hands are holding the sticks, like clutching them, like the death grip, as my teacher, Jeff Hamilton, would say, like you're climbing a rope and you better not let go of that grip or you might fall. So you're getting a very stiff kind of feel, a very stiff sound. In fact, your body may actually get sore. You may form blisters. You may actually have joint pains. I think I mentioned in a previous video that I heard a clinic by Dave Weckl who had to have knee surgery. And back in the day, before the way he plays now, he would bury that beater against the head. And a lot of drummers do that. And after a while, it's kind of like jumping and keeping your knees locked, and you're going to have an impact shock, and something's going to give. So then I have my left hand tension. I'm a right hand drummer, so it's like problems with this left hand. So I worked a lot on rudiments. And obviously the right foot came along through studying through books, private lessons with other teachers, watching drummers perform. I was so fortunate when I was a high school student to be able to watch a live band at every high school after game dance. This ended in the early, I think, 80s. I went to school in the late 70s and graduated from high school in 1980. And back in those days, if you had a dance after a football game or a basketball game, you would always have a live band. I think we had a DJ once and everybody was like, lame. So pretty much every weekend, it was a concert in my cafeteria. And though I had girlfriends and I would dance, I often sat off to the side and just studied and watched the drummers. And it was so fascinating to be able to learn from these guys firsthand, playing the songs that were hit songs on the radio, trying to understand how they could make their body move so fluidly. And in fact, I remember one drummer that's always stuck in my mind because I watched all these different drummers over the many years, some of them in bands that would come back. And I would talk to them sometimes on breaks about their techniques. I was always asking a lot of questions because I really wanted to know. But it was just so cool to see all these bands. But this one drummer in particular played this big white kit, and he played the traditional grip. And I was a match grip player at the time. I've added traditional grip to my playing. That's another whole component about technique that we could get into if you'd like to work with me on this stuff. But this guy was just phenomenal. And part of it maybe was the look. Because, you know, the left-hand traditional grip looks cool, as Jojo Mayer says. And there's this whole thing about using that kind of grip versus the match grip. Because, as Jojo Mayer said in one of his instructional videos, The Secret Weapons of Modern Drumming, Part 1, A Guide to Hand Technique, that he feels like he actually plays more creatively when he uses the traditional grip in one hand and the standard match grip in the other. And he goes about this asymmetrical personality, or the left and right side of your brain. I studied some work by a guy named Robert Monroe where he talked about hemisync, which is hemispherical synchronization of the left and right side of your mind. I like to refer to those as the banking brain and the bicycle brain. So in the learning process, to unlock this codependent coordination issue where people get so frustrated because they can't seem to move their drumming to the next level because their body just doesn't understand the movements between all the parts to be able to do this. I really feel like learning how to read music is really an asset. It's like a blueprint on how the various parts of the drum beat are put together. So one of the things that I do with my students is help them work through learning how to read. And we literally learn how to count rhythms out loud, everything from all up the subdivisions, from whole notes to half notes to quarter notes to eighth notes to eighth triplets to 16th notes to 16th triplets to 32nd notes, even quarter note triplets, half note triplets, you name it. They can actually verbalize the counting with their voice. They can eventually sing it. They can eventually sight read it. And I had a really remarkable experience with a student that I've been taking through this process of building both brains, the banking brain, where they're calculating, they're thinking, they're counting, and then the bicycle brain, which is more the intuitive feel, hearing, that more organic approach, and putting the two together so that they develop this ability to shift back and forth as needed. Now, for me, I learned to speak like all of you before I learned to read. So, in fact, nobody would know how to read if it wasn't for music. And here's what I mean to say. How many of you learned the alphabet by singing a song? You actually sang the alphabet song, which is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, same melody. But because of that melody, you memorized all the letters of the alphabet. Pretty cool, huh? And as a result of learning how to converse pretty fluently for a period of time, then you were introduced to letters like C-A-T, and you'd see a picture of a cat, and you would sound out the different parts. My point is that there's the same literary process that can go into developing your drumming skills. Unfortunately, there's many illiterate drummers out there. Maybe you're one of them, or you don't really know how to read, and you wish you could just sort of get to the end result, skipping the whole mental banking brain process, and I don't know if you could balance your checkbook just by guessing. I think you get my point with that statement. So you're probably frustrated, thinking that you lack certain kinds of abilities. You may even question whether you should really continue. And you look at other drummers and like, wow, they do it so well, and what's my problem? And most of the time I have found that people don't really lack coordination. They lack understanding on how to coordinate. I even talk about speed. Some people think they lack speed. It's really not as much of a speed lack as it is a coordination lack. And I think you could compare this to many different things that you do well versus things you don't, things you spend more time in. Obviously, you're going to do better. So when it comes to like this codependent coordination, it's a matter of learning ways to break things down, learning how to look at each part of the drum beat. And as we put the parts together to make the beat a whole, then we can go into some other areas like, why am I so tense all the time? I remember as a freshman in college doing this epic drum solo on this Buddy Rich chart called Channel 1 Suite. I was a freshman the year before I'd won this drum set competition where Louis Bilson had selected me. And so I had a lot of facilities. So the jazz band director wanted to feature me. Well, at the spring concert, there was 3 tunes that we could play at this festival. One of them was Channel 1 Suite, which I played, and the other drummer played the other 2. Mind you, the solo went great. I got this great standing ovation. It was like awesome. But if you were to look in my arm, you would see so many veins. I was like shocked. I've never seen so many veins in my arm before. And if you grabbed it, it felt like a tree branch. There was so much tension in my body. And that was another big factor in my ability to learn how to coordinate. I used to become so frustrated. And a lot of it, to be honest with you, was a lot of inner drumming issues. I mean, I was like, really an uptight person, extremely insecure. In fact, I'll share with you a statement I learned from a video with a famous drummer named Mike Clark. He said this: I have to play with musicians for a long period of time before I feel that they are comfortable with me. Then I realized that's like my story. You know, growing up in my family and all the issues I dealt with, it was not easy for me to feel comfortable playing with certain people. Just like, you know, how somebody might walk into the room and immediately you pick up on some weird vibes, like they're really pissed off about something, and you go, how's it going? Because you sense something. Oh, I'm fine. Fine. You know what that stands for? F-I-N-E. Frustrated, insecure, neurotic, emotional. All these angsty feelings because it's not working out. Now, I've experienced that about drumming because drumming has been so important to me. Been doing it for so long. It's my life passion. I mean, that's it. This is who I am as a drummer. And so it was really important to me to become successful at something I was so passionate about. So I had to work through so many layers of relaxing my body, trying to just examine, why am I so tense? And I mentioned in one of my earlier videos about a famous drummer, Steve Gadd, who was so relaxed. And he was like the mental image picture that I held in my mind that assisted me to relax. Another teacher that I had, Jeff Hamilton, great brush player. I went through all this brush stuff, and he even wrote the foreword to one of my books called Drummer's Guide to Big Band. But he taught me how to relax on the cymbals. In fact, he snuck up to a practice room once at a jazz festival many years ago and listened to me practice. I only realized this because I've been playing the drums, mostly the drums and not the cymbals. And he startled me by walking in and said, you know, you got a really good touch on the drums, but we need to work on your touch on the cymbals. I'd never heard anybody make that clarification. The drum set is a multiple percussion instrument. It really is. You've got tom-toms, you've got a snare drum, you've got a bass drum, you've got hi-hat cymbals, crash cymbals, a ride cymbal, maybe some effect cymbals like splashes and chinas or stacked. The point is that these are all percussion instruments that have, of course, been assembled. And so there's a whole lot to playing all the different surfaces, different angles, the setup. There's been a lot of discussion in the group about setup and what's the best setup to do. And there's a lot of different opinions on setup. And it's something that I really have to sit down behind a person's drum set to really be able to help them with that, because that's a big factor in the codependent coordination. A lot of times snare drums are too low, so you can't execute a rim shot without your hand hitting your leg. Maybe the hi-hat cymbals need to be brought up higher. Maybe the toms need to be lifted, flattened, and centered, and you need to raise your stool. I have to see you sit behind your drum set. Are you longer in the legs, longer in the torso? There's all these different body proportions. People are unique individuals, and as a result, I need to see how they sit behind the drum set. And I mentioned in a previous video, I could tell a lot about a drummer's skill set or knowledge just by looking at their setup and seeing how there's certain things they just didn't know. It's a big process. The drum set is the most challenging percussion instrument to play. You have to use your hands, you have to use your feet. One of the other things in this discussion in the group is this concept of open-handed playing. And even guys talking about tips on double bass, like I do everything with my feet that I do with my hands. And, you know, not a bad idea for building just raw talent and technique and mechanical skills. But I always feel like we have to play things to serve the music. So even though there's massive different kinds of technical exercises or coordination exercises that you can work on, if they don't really directly help you become a musical drummer, then sometimes that stuff is just more of a weightlifting, look at this cool little thing I can do on the drums. It's like a dog and pony trick and not necessarily something that's applicable to supporting the music as a whole. In fact, I'll share with you a statement that Jeff Hamilton told me once. He said, there are two kinds of people that play the drum set. There are drummers that choose the drum set, and there are musicians that choose the drum set, and we can all hear the difference. Very interesting concept. It depends on how you're approaching the instrument. Are you approaching the instrument from the drums? Are you approaching the instrument from the cymbals? What the heck do you mean by that, Gary? Well, there's this whole other world of technique for cymbals. In fact, I talk to my students a lot about practicing rudiments. You can do it on a pad. It's important to spend some time on an instrument, an actual drum. And then I say, why don't you practice some rudiments on maybe the ride cymbal? How about the hi-hat cymbal? Maybe even a crash. And most people would think that's really strange, but 50% of the drum set is cymbals. The other 50 is drums. So you have to be a good cymbal player, not just a good drum player. There's different dynamic touches, and it's involved. I understand. I've screamed, cried, cussed, thrown stuff. But, you know, that's because I wanted it. And if you want it, you can get there too. You just probably don't know how. And so if you're really sick of this, frustrated, you've gone through books, but even books don't seem to help you. And the truth is, I don't think many drummers really know how to go through a book. They just want to go right to the beats. They don't read any of the instructions. There's this whole head talk, this whole inner game of music concept that has to be addressed if you want the outer game to be expressed. I think Dave Weckl said it really well once. He said, in order to get something out of your body, you first have to get it into your body before beginning to express it on the instrument. And I'll add to that, musically, because so much of the time, drummers' focus is more on drumming than it is the music as a whole. I say that because I was a former college professor and a jazz band director, and for years I sat in the drum chair in the jazz band and heard the music from inside the car, if you will. And then I got to be a director and get in front of the band, and whoa, I was shocked at how much different the pictures sound out front. This is why it's important for people to record themselves, videotape themselves, can be self-revealing. But in the end, I couldn't, as I said before, be where I'm at if I didn't have teachers. I needed some drum gurus, people that could really fast track everything that I was interested in doing, people that I could ask questions to and they could, bam, give me the answers. Because that's one of the things I want, is I'm a now kind of guy. I want to know what's going on. I'm just as anxious as everybody else in wanting to become good, but I know that quality takes time and that you have to go deep, which sometimes perceived as slow. But one of my favorite sayings is if you want to get good fast, go slow. Because if you can't play it, then you can't play it. But if you can play it slow, then you can. And if you play it long enough, you can get it. I'm here to help you figure this crap out because it's going to be a frustrating journey if you always try to go alone. So if you want an expert, that's somebody I consider myself. This is my life's path. This is my life's passion. I don't just do this during the week and take the weekends off. This is what I eat, breathe, and always have done. So if you're ready to make that fast track change in your drumming and you really want to cut to the chase and get the right answers on how to seriously improve your drumming, both mechanically and musically, then I'm definitely the guy you're going to want to contact. So I'm going to peek over here and see a few people that made some comments. Hey, Chris, nice to see you. All right, some great intel. Mostly highs. I appreciate you guys all piping in. Please submit some questions so I can answer them. And by all means, if you're really ready to make this change, I've got some ideas that are going to seriously turn your drumming around. So you should private message me if you're ready to get off your duff and get your drumming kicked into high gear. So I hope you've enjoyed this little post, and I look forward to talking with you all again on Thursday morning at 10:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until then, continue your practicing, be nice to yourself, And keep your eye out on the Facebook group for more interesting insights into drumming. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care.